Good morning. Can you hear me? I guess I can't, okay, it does sound like it's on. Okay, this is the Strategic Growth Council meeting. So I'm guessing there's some money involved today by the turnout. Thank you for being here. We have quite a lot on the agenda, so let's get to it. Mike, anything before I launch? Okay. I do want to note for the record that Manuel Pastor, one of our public members, is not able to be here today. He had a previously scheduled medical issue. He's fine, but it's a periodic thing that conflicted with this, and he wanted to make sure that I said publicly that he really regrets not being here, and that we tried to actually set up a webcast, but we ran into some issues with that as well, and but he has certainly read the material, and he's actually provided us some comments as well, which are on the record. So with that, let's move right into my personal favorite each meeting, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from the previous meeting. Any motion on that?
I move the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. All right, so with that, let me turn it over. Let me ask if, under number 4 here, if any council members have any updates or comments or anything they wish to say at this point. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Ken. I just wanted to take a moment to announce, in addition to the items before the commission today that reflect the awarding of cap and trade funds, the transportation agency later today will also be doing a separate award of cap and trade funds for the Transit Capital Grant Program. There is some coordination between the two programs, but I just wanted to flag that will be announced later today as well. And then finally tomorrow, the California Department of Transportation will also put out something on transit operating grants also out of cap and trade that will be announced. So in total this week, there's about $370 million that's being put out in cap and trade funds. Okay.
Other comments from council members? All right. Okay, so let's move on to item 5. Mike McCoy, your executive report.
Thank you, Ken. Council members, staff, members of the public, I'm going to make a slightly different kind of executive report today. I want to talk about some immediate victories, I guess, in terms of our program and our projects, but I want to put them in a bigger context of where we have been over the last 3 years. And I want to do that because today will be my last council meeting. I have talked to each of you individually, and we know that we both have enjoyed this time very much, and for reasons that have nothing to do with my belief in this institution or my affection for you all, it is really time for me to step down. I will continue to assist the council with various special projects, but a new director will take over. Ken might discuss that later. So in this 50,000-foot overview, I think the theme that unites it is that the council has moved or is moving from being a planning organization to being an action organization. We had the planning grants, and that was really the transition point where we worked with communities that really wanted to use more contemporary approaches to planning to make sustainable communities, reduce their VMT and GHG. And these plans have now been completed in the first round plans. Some of them are winning national awards. Others are winning regional and local awards. Others still are moving into actual construction, best of all. And some, we hope, will be applying to our Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program and become the pipeline for good future projects. So in that line, we have the Affordable Housing Sustainable Community program, and this is bricks and mortar. We have set up screens for this program that assure that the applicants that we're recommending today, and really all the applicants that were in the final round, are ready to go. They have all of their permits. They're through CEQA. They have their finances verifiably arranged to the last dollar that they need for the project. So when we discuss recommendations later today, imagine that the projects that we're talking about, as soon as a contract can be signed, there will be a shovel in the ground. That's action. The 5-year infrastructure plan has been a particular concern of mine. I know the statute says we will review the 5-year infrastructure plan, and we've had difficulty doing that. We've only been able to make a rather cursory review of the plans over the last couple of years. But during that time, with Ken's help, we've worked with the Department of Finance to create a partnership that will see us authoring part of the 5-year infrastructure plan, particularly that part that has to do with infrastructure being consistent with California's planning priorities for infill development, for the conservation of agricultural and natural lands, for efficient development, and for equity in our communities. So we will have a hand in discussing those billions of dollars as they are committed for future year expenditure. And connecting to the infrastructure plan is something that when I first got here we were calling RAMP, and you all understand the Regional Advanced Mitigation Program. And it was a great start. It was a pilot for something that ignited our imagination and has brought us to a point today where either yesterday or today, I don't see Denny, but either yesterday or today, we're entering into a contract to provide an interactive online software piece to use with our partners in state, federal, local, regional, and NGO organizations to jointly look at California's conservation priorities and have the hard discussions that are required to understand what our primary values are, at the same time as we invite our infrastructure partners to tell us everything that they know they're planning to do over a 20-year or more horizon. We intend to work with those two pieces of information together and with both those institutional sectors together to do what long we believe should have been done, which is to plan infrastructure and conservation simultaneously. And there are many people to thank for this. Secretary Laird has been the champion on the council, and we appreciate it very much. That program, just coincidentally, also has potentially high-speed rail as its first major environmental conservation infrastructure project. And so we're really hoping that that pans out for either the stretch from Palmdale to Burbank or the stretch from Gilroy over to Merced. We think that the tool and the goodwill that could be brought by all the agencies to an early advanced understanding of the resources in those regions could help both have biologically more meaningful mitigation at the same time as we streamline approvals for high-speed rail. And then finally, one of the programs that started it all, the Health in All Policies program, it is also moving from a time of planning to a time of action. The Health in All Policies program, for example, has now put the weight of the public health community behind community greening and access to green spaces in California's cities. And this is going to make a difference. When we have the public health officials and the doctors and other health professionals of this state going to bat for the kinds of communities that we envision for tomorrow, that's action that we can be proud of. So with all of those things, I think you have become an action organization. and I'm sure you have an appetite for a lot more of it. That would be the end of my report, but it would, I would like to say that I have great confidence in the future of your institution, our institution. This is a bold experiment in government, and my experience in chairing interagency work groups, steering committees, and other action-oriented groups has been, we know how to work together. And I would like to see us continue that and accelerate that. And I know you can do that. So thank you very much. It's been a wonderful 3 years. And with that, we have a number of excellent projects to look at today. These are projects that meet all of the primary needs of the affordable housing, sustainable communities, and strategic agricultural land conservation programs. We will be recommending a suite of those to you, and we will explain why subsequently.
So thanks, Mike. And obviously, we knew this day was coming, and you and I have talked, and we promise not to belabor this. But I do want to say, personally, I want to thank you for your service to the council and to the people of the state of California. It's no small thing. It's been at times difficult, but you know, I want to point out to all the people who are here that you and your organization have moved two very substantial grant programs, $130 million this year and very likely more next year, from absolutely ground zero, starting with no program, and creating two programs that we're going to talk about and provide grant money today in all likelihood in a matter of months. And there will be growing pains, and I'm sure we'll hear about some of them today, but I think on the whole it is a huge success and a terrific effort, and you get to take credit for it, and you get our undying thanks. You mentioned a number of other things that I want to at least underscore. You didn't mention the urban footprint program, which you have very substantial individual responsibility from moving from initiation to fruition, and we're now actually training people around the state to use urban footprint as part of planning and how cities think about general plans and how we integrate that level of planning into all kinds of decision making. All kinds of data efforts that you've been part of, and modeling and moving forward on a whole series of things that have been very quiet and sort of under the radar, and you've done it all while having very small staff, so thank you all to the staff as well, but thank you, Mike, for your leadership, and many of you probably don't know, but Mike is a world champion kayaker, so I suspect that the world of kayaking will see more of him now. But at any rate, please take my personal thanks and that of the council, and thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And before we go to, we have one public comment on this item, but I want to just briefly introduce Randall Winston, who is going to be the interim, do we call it director or executive officer? What's your title? Okay. Okay, so Randall, why don't you stand up and just say hello. Randall's will be the interim director. Perfect. We'll do a more formal introduction at the next public meeting, but this remains Mike, so we'll just have you do what you did, which was to say hello, and we'll move on from there. So I have one public comment on this item, so why don't we go to that right now? Kimberly Chen.
Thank you, council members. Kimberly Chen with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network. I just want to speak very briefly on Mr. McCoy's report in regards to the Health in All Policies Task Force. We very much appreciate the update on the work of the task force. It's always great for us in the public to hear the work that it's been doing, and happy to hear that the good work is continuing. As you know, CPEN was very much involved in the original work of forming the task force and gathering public information and input into this most recent plan. And in fact, it's been almost 5 years since the task force's initial report to the Strategic Growth Council, and given Mr. McCoy's comments and about the context of the transition from a planning to an action-oriented council, we thought this might actually be a very appropriate time for the task force to work on another report and see which direction, new directions that it can take. So maybe this is something we suggest that the council can consider looking into, especially important in the context of the work that it's been doing in greening in parks. And again, from a public health perspective, CPEN is very excited to see equity at the center and getting greening in parks resources to the communities that need it most. And of course, CPEN is always happy to be a partner and support the work of the task force and the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, yes, Anna.
Thank you very much. To the extent that, well, first let me say, Mike, we're going to miss you. Thank you for your service to the state of California. To the extent that we're moving from being a grant-making organization around planning to really starting to develop, it's important, I think, for us to continue the work Mike started on the strategic plan. We started that, and there's a lot more to do. Also, thank you for setting up the lessons learned, because I think that's going to be really important for everyone that's here today to participate in. We want to walk through the process we've gone, the transition we've gone through, and would really appreciate your input. And along with the health and all policies, there were two things on the executive officer report that I thought we might want to take a look at as a council. One is the health and all policies, but the other one is the urban footprint. Just to have a more practical idea of exactly how do you use it, and how, how does it connect to everything else that we're doing within our own silos as we're breaking them down. So just wanted to make sure we put that out there as we make this transition.
That's a great idea. It's finally at a point, I see Liz nodding her head, it's finally at a point where we can do that and show actually how it can be used. I think it's a great idea. Other council comments before we head into the dollar section of the day's events? Okay, so let's move now to item number 6, which is the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. Julie?
Well, good morning, council members. My name is Julie Alvis, Deputy Assistant Secretary with the Natural Resources Agency. I'm here presenting with John Lowry, standing behind me, Assistant Director with the Department of Conservation, and we are presenting item 6 on your agenda, an action item pertaining to the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. The staff recommendation is to approve awarding $4,601,345 million in greenhouse gas reduction fund to 12 projects that support greenhouse gas reductions and their related co-benefits, and approve one alternate easement project in the event funding becomes available from one of the easements that if it didn't materialize, we'd like to just have this next project ready to go. We're going to highlight a few of the projects in this presentation, but please note that detailed information about all of the projects are in your council binders and were posted to the website for the public, and I believe there are materials in the back of the room. So as you're aware, the Budget Act of 2014 appropriated $130 million from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund To the Strategic Growth Council to develop and administer the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. Included in the implementing language, the SGC was also tasked with protecting agricultural lands from conversion to more intensive land uses such as urban and low-density sprawl. So the council took action early on to allocate $5 million to the Ag Land Protections piece, which became known as the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, also known as SALC. So these are the program goals, primarily, of course, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and there's a variety of co-benefits that go along with protecting our agricultural lands. Given that this is a modest amount of funding available for this program, we knew early on that we wanted to design a program that leveraged as much as possible investments in order to maximize opportunities for partnerships and then also to just accomplish as much as we could. We focused on agricultural lands, most critical, most at risk of conversion to non-ag uses. The program, created through robust stakeholder input, envisioned a three-element approach that would be rolled out over the years for the years that funding is available. And it links three key areas of investment: planning, easements, and then future years management practices. These three elements together build a strong and sensible approach to affecting improved land use priorities across California. So this is what we did in fiscal year 2014-15, starting, of course, with just development of the program, public workshops, development of draft guidelines. We briefed the council along the way, refined the guidelines based on input from our community, and final guidelines were approved by the SGC at the January meeting. We held a solicitation process, reviewed those, and are here before you today with our recommendations for award. We've also worked concurrently through this process with the Air Resources Board to develop quantification methodology. And I just want to say that I'm very appreciative of all of the staff time that has taken place. And we've really developed some strong relationships, and we're looking forward to moving forward in the next year. In this first year, we focused on investments for ag land strategies and easements. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ag land strategies piece, and then John Lowry will discuss the easements piece. We set aside up to $1 million for ag land strategies, although the guidelines allow us to move any funding that we didn't use for this piece to easements. So it did allow for some flexibility there. We received $880,000 in requests from 10 applicants, and we are recommending approval today of 5 projects totaling $492,495. So just to highlight a couple of the plans, one project we would like to award today is for the Mendocino County Ag Land Conservation Planning Program, which at its heart protects ag lands from conversion to more GHG-intensive purposes. Their goals of their planning effort will focus on increasing Williamson Act enrollment, increasing the capacity of their local land trusts to expand agricultural conservation easement programs, to prioritize their acquisitions, and to increase technical assistance to their agricultural community to foster best management practices that are aimed at reducing GHG emissions and other benefits. So there's a list of the partners there, so you can really see that it is a effort that has a lot of participation, which is wonderful to see. The second Ag Land Strategy project I'd like to highlight is the Butte County Agricultural Land Conservation Strategy Plan. Again, like the others at its heart, it's about ag land protection. Really keeping our ag lands as ag lands and focusing development into more infill, discrete boundaries. The goals of this plan is to develop a priority map to identify their ag resources at greatest risk of conversion and to prepare for a strategy approval by the County Board of Supervisors that builds on a lot of the other efforts that they have already been working on, their climate action plan, general plan update, zoning ordinances, the draft ag mitigation ordinance. And again, this is all being developed with a lot of strategic partnerships in the area. So I'm going to let John talk at you for a little bit on the easements. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you, Chairman Alex and members of the council for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to run through a series of slides that characterize our recommendations relative to the ag land conservation easement element of the program. So starting with process, we went through what we call a two-step process to solicit proposals, starting with pre-proposals, which were meant primarily to provide the opportunity for the applicant to interact with the agency and to get feedback on the potential suitability and relevance of a particular ag conservation easement for its qualities relative to this particular funding source and this particular situation. So we received 33 pre-proposals, totaling about $16.5 million in program funding requests. Which clicker? Down, up, yeah, side, okay, yeah. The second step was the solicitation of full proposals. When we received 10 full proposals, requesting a total of $6.8 million in program funding, with a total conservation easement value, excuse me, of $17.7 million. The applications, if approved, applications totaled about 15,200 acres of potential conserved lands. What we are recommending for funding today are 7 conservation easement projects totaling $4.1 million in program funds, with an additional $13 million in estimated conservation easement value. The total acreage that would be conserved if these proposals were approved, about 14,000 acres. And when you characterize the individual projects themselves, about 20% of the acreage is currently in irrigated crops. About 80% is in rangeland. I want to point out that, so basically we're purchasing some very significant greenhouse gas emission reduction, as well as numerous and in some ways very significant co-benefits for about 33% of the total cost of those values. So let me give you a quick snapshot, and in this case you actually get a snapshot. I'll run you through 3 projects very quickly. Monterey County, 129 acre offering, intensely and extraordinarily valuable vegetable crop land, 1 mile from the city limit of Salinas, 6/10 of a mile from the sphere of influence of the city of Salinas. And you can see the sort of the pattern of development as it evolves towards the parcel that is being recommended for protection under a permanent ag conservation easement. calculated carbon dioxide estimated reductions, 1,300 metric tons. That without editorializing, is based on a methodology that is footnoted at the bottom. It was agreed to between our agency, Resources Agency, and the Air Resources Board. I think it's a very conservative but reliable estimation of greenhouse gas emission benefits. Next snapshot, and this is a characterization of one of the non-irrigated or rangeland offerings that has some significant benefits. This is a fairly large ranch, 8,847 acres in total. It straddles the Butte and Tehama County lines. Although it's extraordinarily close to the city limits of Chico. We had one of our staff people tour the ranch with the applicants and came away with a very significant note that from farm gate to the nearest Starbucks, 5 minutes. So although it's a little bit deceptive on this map, it's actually very close to both the city limit and the sphere of influence of the city of Chico. And therefore is very much threatened with what we call rural subdivision type development. It's got some very significant greenhouse gas benefits associated with it, as well as some extraordinary and very significant co-benefits, including critical habitat for a wintering deer herd, as well as a number of rare plant species. Third snapshot is a project on the outskirts of the city of Petaluma in Sonoma County. It's about a half mile from the city limits of the city of Petaluma. You can see its juxtaposition there. It matches up well with a number of other easements that have been put in place. A very strategic pattern that has been evolving for some time in Sonoma County to sort of create a buffer zone between urban development and agricultural lands that the community wants to protect in perpetuity. Again, greenhouse gas benefits can be calculated. These are vehicle miles traveled and then the equivalency of those vehicle miles traveled. And it's a reduction in, well, excuse me, it's I'm going to get it screwed up in my mind. What we are actually doing for the most part is we are avoiding increases in greenhouse gas emissions. And those avoided increases in greenhouse gas emissions are what we're representing here in the estimates. Sorry, didn't mean to confuse you there. Okay. Next steps.
I just wanted to quickly walk through the next steps, and I'll put up again the staff recommendation. With council approval today, staff will begin immediately preparing grant agreements for the approved projects, and we'll also begin immediately preparing for the fiscal year 2015-16 grant round, which will include a review of the existing programmatic grant guidelines. We are planning to hold our own sessions with stakeholders to start looking at what changes may be required in those guidelines, and any revisions would come before this council again for approval for the next round. We will be preparing a work plan and timeline, which we'll present to you at your next council meeting. Just to state one more time, the staff recommendation, which is to approve awarding $4,601,345 million in Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to 12 projects supporting greenhouse gas reductions and related co-benefits, and approve one alternate easement project in the event the funding becomes available.
Thank you very much, and thank both of you. I know you both work very hard, as did your agencies on this, so thank you for that. Julia, one question on the strategy grants. Without going into which entities did not receive money, what were the types of things that were different for those that received versus those that you're recommending grants versus the three that you're recommending not receive grants? What sort of issues were there?
So I'm going to just answer that by speaking to our process. I actually did not participate in the review of grant, just to give some separation between, the program and the technical review. As the guidelines stated, we had a technical review committee that was made up of multi-agency representation with various expertises. They used the criteria in our approved grant guidelines to evaluate the individual projects and came up with a set of recommendations. In this initial year, one of the challenges was just the timing of everything, and SB 1018 requires that every department that spends a greenhouse gas reduction fund must develop an expenditure record, which needs concurrence through the ARB, Air Resources Board. That process was going on at the same time and after the approval of our guidelines. So in coming up with the requirements, in order to meet those requirements under that expenditure record, our technical review committee's recommendations were reviewed under the SB 1018 premise, resulting in the recommendations that are before you today. I can't get into specifics of why not this and why that, but just to note that there were two separate reviews that took place.
Other questions, comments?
Can I follow up with that question, because that question was raised for me also. Can you help me better understand the connection between the easements and the strategy? Because it would seem to me that the strategy program is a really important foundational piece that could help us better make decisions around easements. And so I would think that we would be aggressively looking for people or jurisdictions to actually do that. I noticed that we gave grants or recommended grants for jurisdictions that are now doing programs. Are there many jurisdictions who have strategies in place, and are we aggressively looking to get strategies in place to help us make these decisions?
Can I take it first? Okay. So we do see strategies as an important part to the overall program vision. And there was a discussion at this council early on when we brought the concept before you that we wanted to give cities and counties resources in order to do the things they needed to do to assess their agricultural lands and figure out the best approach for protecting them over the long term. Because this is Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, we need to make sure that there is a link to an actual implementing project that occurs with these funds. And so although we see these elements linked because they are separate grants for projects, we still need to follow those strategy plans through to the next stage, which is those on-the-ground activities. So the Department of Conservation will monitor what happens with these plans, and we will be quantifying the on-the-ground activities that occur, whether it be an easement or another, policy, or maybe it's a buffer zone policy or some other way that these ag lands are protected, and we'll be measuring the avoided increases to GHG from those protections.
Let me make a comment because I have been involved in some of this. One of the big issues here is because, as Julie just said, we have to have a specific showing of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. The question is whether the plan has a sufficiently direct tie to those emission reductions, and in each instance we have to show that. So it has to be tied pretty closely to implementation, and you'll hear that as a theme.
That's one of the areas that we'll be looking at for year 2, the program 2, is, can we keep this important element, but how do we more directly link it to, after plan activities? One of the challenges, of course, is that a plan helps you identify what activities you need to have happen. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg issue. So any advice is welcome.
Bob.
Thanks. I thought this was really well laid out and clear, and the summaries gave us really a very good context for where this land was. The summary pages were well done. I have a couple questions. How do we know that the price of the easement is appropriate? Maybe I'll ask all the questions, and you might just take notes on what they are. The second project looks exponentially better than all the rest in terms of metric tons of greenhouse gases per dollar. I'm just curious as to why. And
Can you tell me which project that is?
Sure, it's the Eastern Sierra Land Trust project. So that one really stood out. I'm just curious as to the reasons. Then in terms of metric tons of greenhouse gases per dollar, I have no idea as to those numbers, whether those are good or bad. I mean, these 0.0020 doesn't really mean much to me. So if you could help explain that and let me know whether this is a good way to cut greenhouse gases or whether it's not such a good way. And then I guess there are a number of cattle ranches here. Those have cattle, at least from what I've read, has serious water implications. And I wonder whether there's been any, whether water usage has been taken into account in any of the grading, or whether we, are we perpetuating more cattle ranching, and is that on the water side a bad thing? So sorry for all the questions, but I just need some clarification. Thanks.
So let me see if I can answer all those questions in order. First of all, when we talk about agricultural production, one way to characterize what we are doing is that we are in fact trying to perpetuate agricultural production. Beef cattle, sheep, and other forms of livestock are valuable both from a food and fiber perspective. I think I want to make it clear that is inherently a part of what our program is trying to do, is to protect our agricultural productivity through a greater level of protection from avoided development. Greenhouse gas benefits are, I think we would say, modest. But we do feel at this point in time that the use of ag conservation easements, and then in future years, the use of management practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions or sequester carbon will definitely prove to be beneficial in terms of reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions. Whether or not the value of the conservation easement is fair or appropriate is determined through an appraisal process. That appraisal process is one of the things that will need to be commissioned and carried out as a part of due diligence and in the interactive process leading from the decision that you make today to the time that escrow is actually closed and the easement is finalized, which could be anywhere from 12 to 18 months from now.
So these numbers are not final numbers. They're sort of estimates that were put pending appraisals?
That is correct.
Okay.
Although the safeguard in terms of the state expenditure is that the amount of funding that would be committed would not be increased as a result of an appraisal that comes in.
And then lastly, the one project seemed off
Yes.
the charts relative to the others. What is it about that project, and how do we try to encourage more of them?
Well,
Because
that's a great question. I'll give you two basic reasons. One is it's a large parcel that is zoned down to fairly small individual parcels, which can create a reasonable density of development. It'd be, I would suspect, vacation homes or, sort of getaway places. The more important consideration and the variable that that most influenced the calculation was the distance from that offering to services. The nearest reliable year-round services for that parcel are located in the Carson Valley, Gardnerville, and Minden, Nevada. And there's a substantial distance. I'd have to look at staff to tell you how many miles it is from that offering into town, but it's a substantial distance. And that has a direct effect on vehicle miles traveled.
Let me make an additional comment on this. We're in the early stages of figuring out how to calculate greenhouse gas emission reductions and their relationship to preserving agricultural lands. There's some literature on it. It's a growing field, and there's more research that's being proposed, and that's starting to be done. So I think some of this will change as we learn more. And my guess, just as a guess from some of the early literature, is that the amount of reduction from preserving ag land, the estimates will go up.
I would agree with that, Chairman Alex.
Mr. Chair.
John.
And you have Ms. Ross as well. I was going to wait until after we heard from the public to make some comments, but the questions from the council members have really, in a good way, illustrated the challenges of different goals in a program like this, because we are trying to meet the test of greenhouse gas reductions. That is our basic thing. Then if in fact certain land really creates greenhouse gas reductions by avoidance and other ways and is nearest to urban areas, it might actually have a higher cost per acre. If it's far away, as the one that was just described, it might actually, because of less vehicle miles traveled, create a great reduction, but have a much different figure of dollar per whatever the measurement was that was used in this. And if we were doing this as a program without the greenhouse gas reduction lens, we'd probably have a whole different way that we would look at what is the best thing to do. And so what we're trying to do is meet the greenhouse gas reductions as the first threshold. Then you compute what the value is, and it's really different given the different stages. And yet that isn't necessarily a basis for making a decision. And if, with Councilmember Fisher's question about ranching, actually we meet initially great greenhouse gas reductions from it not being urban development, and don't look at it at the lens of what different agricultural use might be dealing with water use or other things. So we have all these different moving pieces, and we try to do what is best for the legal underpinning of the entire thing, and it leads to a grid that is just like the one you're seeing. And so I think it meets the demands of the program very well. but then it raises all these other questions because of the different ways that it's constructed or the different ways you look at it. And so in the end, barring some public testimony that persuades me otherwise, I'm going to support it because it does that. And then, as the chair said, there'll be some things that'll even be further refined as we move into the second and third years and might give us some additional guidance. So I think that's the difficult thing, and I want to say that given the fact that there's all those moving pieces and it's the first year and it's the design and it's trying to meet the legal underpinning, this has actually been an amazing job given all the demands that have been on it. So I'll look forward to the public testimony, but I just thought given all the individual questions to date, it would be good to try to take them together and make that characterization.
Thank you. Karen?
Just a comment and a quick question, and I agree with Mr. Fisher. I think these sheets were very helpful. I'm especially excited that even though this is a greenhouse gas emission reduction program, we're also articulating the co-benefits that come from conserving and perpetuating working landscapes. My one question, and I should know the answer to this, is that we articulate the development that would have occurred. Is there a long-term commitment on these lands not to develop for other agricultural purposes, knowing the sensitivity of a lot of foothills land that's being developed for permanent crops? That could be an issue that's been looked at, and are they locking themselves into maintaining rangeland as rangeland for perpetuity?
That was actually a very significant topic that was brought up during the public development of the public involvement during development of the program. The guidelines spell out that an applicant can agree to keep rangeland in rangeland. We're not going to interfere with the management practices. Agricultural productivity remains, but between the landowner and the grantee, generally a land trust, they can put into the easement agreement the land will stay in rangeland in perpetuity. Yeah. And Mr. Fisher, I think that also speaks in some ways to your question regarding water and how significant that potential issue is. And I'm going to change my hat real quickly and very quickly go over the Department of Conservation has farmland mapping responsibilities, and one of the major trends we're seeing in terms of the conversion of rangelands at this point in time is that it's being converted to more intensive irrigated agricultural uses, which require much more substantial uses of water than beef cattle production.
Secretary Caballero.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to figure out what our title is here, but Secretary Ross brought up a really good point, and so it leads me to the question of that was rangeland, and I'm concerned about irrigated agriculture because what we've seen in some of the valleys is that part of the county's move to develop economically, although it's ag land, is to allow processing facilities which are considered agricultural, or the kinds of things that we would think are more urban in nature. And so the question I have is whether there are restrictions on, if it's irrigated, if there's an easement and it's irrigated agriculture, I'm assuming it's going to stay as irrigated agriculture, number one. And number two, I just want to add as a footnote, because I spent 15 years on the Salinas City Council, and so truth in advertising is really important. In your statements, it says that the city of Salinas intends to grow the pie by expanding in all directions. I'm assuming that the grow the pie didn't come from you. It came from the Ag Land Trust. And as a matter of fact, the city of Salinas does not intend to grow the pie. We have a very strict limit. If you take a look at the picture that you showed, that urban edge was developed probably the latest was in the 60s. So for the last 50 years, there's been no growth out in that direction. There will be no growth because the general plan restricts it. But I support the project. I think the Blanco area is one of the most productive and the most high-value agricultural land in the world, and we want to protect it, and to put easements on it is a really good thing. But to blame it on the city of Salinas and say, well, they're going to grow in all directions is really not true. So I just want to make sure that that's out there. And John he's smiling over there because he knows that the county and the city sometimes point the finger at who's responsible, and want to make sure that if it's irrigated land, it stays irrigated land.
And I'll just have to apologize. Maybe we didn't do as good a job of filtering the statements made by the land trust as we could have. Yeah. No, but that was not an editorial comment on the part of staff. No.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I will work with the staff in the future to remind them that there's a former mayor of Salinas on the council, and they should vet that. And I should also say that everything that Councilmember Caballero said is exactly true and right, and I'm very familiar with that area. Having said that, that's also been true with the city of Watsonville, and then they did a voter initiative to try to end those long-standing things and grow into areas that everybody thought were set aside forever. And so even though it's totally true about Salinas, it just really helps knowing that we have these easements going forward.
In this business, we have just a real simple way of reminding people that things can change very dramatically with 3 votes on a Tuesday. And that's the way local land use planning often works, and we need to be aware of that. That's why we feel conservation easements are so important, because they literally lock up the potential for perpetuity.
Okay. Other questions or comments? We have quite a few public comments, but before we go to that, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Well, tell me what you moved.
Yes, I have to get used to doing it. I second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, so thank you very much for the presentation. And now let's go to public comment, and I ask everybody to be pithy. So Sarah Press is first, followed by Jeff Stump.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Press. I'm with the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. So really, I wanted to say thank you very much for your consideration. We're very excited to see these recommendations. We're looking forward to working, hopefully, with staff on this project and to being part of this first round of this exciting and innovative program. Also just wanted to briefly mention that we are currently working on 8 other agricultural conservation easement projects to show that we have a lot of good work in the works, and hope that there will be additional funding coming through in additional years for more agricultural land protection and greenhouse gas reduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff Stump, followed by Craig Edgerton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. My name is Jeff Stump. I'm the Director of Conservation with the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. We are also a proposed grantee. We wholeheartedly welcome you into the realm of taking permanent on-the-ground action. I think you'll find that protecting agricultural lands with its healthy food and jobs, associated natural resource values, and climate benefits is meaningful and rewarding. We want to thank the council and its staff. They did an excellent job, as you've already pointed out, Mr. Chairman, of coming up with a really balanced new program that's going to lead to a lot of agricultural protection. We do want you to continue to actively support this program. You'll hear from folks that probably needs more money. Malt also is working on a portfolio of probably about $25 million of agricultural protection projects that have significant climate benefits, natural resource values, not to mention healthy local food and jobs. So we'll continue working with you as you move into the third phase also, which is actually providing funds for the implementation of climate beneficial practices on protected agricultural land. So we can reduce the GHG emissions, potential emissions, but we can also sequester lots of carbon. And ranching practices, improving ranching practices has been demonstrated to sequester tons, literally, of atmospheric carbon in the ground. So there's the bad of cattle ranching and there's the really good of cattle ranching. And so hopefully we're going to change the focus on agriculture to those really climate beneficial practices through this program. So again, thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. Craig Edgerton, followed by Chris Coburn.
Thank you, Council. My name is Craig Edgerton. I'm with the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy based out of San Jose. And I just want to emphasize one program, and that's under the strategy category, the planning grants and how important those are. In Santa Clara County, we have a number of land trusts and different agencies, the Open Space Authority and others that are all trying to do the same thing, and yet we find ourselves in positions oftentimes where we're not necessarily in conflict, but we don't always know exactly who's doing what. And with an overall master plan would make that so much easier and make the dollars that you do award so much more effective. I just want to emphasize those planning grants, and those should really be funded to the maximum possible. And I think, I'm not exactly sure that the Open Space Authority was one of the 5 that was approved for our county to get that planning started. So thank you for that, and I encourage you to keep those things are really critical for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Coburn, followed by Jeannie Merrill.
Good morning, Chris Coburn, Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz County. I'm here in support of the proposal submitted by the County of Santa Cruz to develop a voluntary rotational cover cropping and land fallowing program for the Pajaro Valley. Pajaro Valley supports an $800 million agricultural industry, but that industry is threatened by groundwater overdraft and seawater intrusion. And so looking at supporting that long-term viability of that industry really relies on reducing our water use, growing our crops more efficiently. And so what we are looking at doing is developing a feasible mix of alternatives and incentives to increase the pace of rotational cover cropping and land fallowing to not only have the benefits of the reduced water use, but then also to realize the benefits that we're talking about here today in terms of sequestering greenhouse gases, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, building soil health, and just the recognition of the benefits that agricultural lands have in terms of carbon sequestration when you compare it to urban land use. And so again, I want to thank you for your consideration of our proposal. Thank you for this program. It's very important for the work that we're doing in Santa Cruz. We look forward to hopefully more funding coming down the line in terms of the technical assistance for this program, and happy to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeannie Merrill, followed by Nicole Bird.
Jeannie Merrill with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. We're a coalition of sustainable agriculture and farmer leader groups. I wanted to thank the Strategic Growth Council today. We're making historic investments in farmland conservation as a climate change strategy. It's sort of the first in the country, and it's an important moment as many of us together with you have been working on these issues for several years now. I wanted to focus just briefly on some implementation comments and questions of funding. As you know, California loses an average about 50,000 acres of farmland annually, much of that to urban conversion and rural ranchette development. And we think the SALT program is well positioned to help stem the loss of those critical lands and help reduce associated greenhouse gas emissions. Moving forward, we talked a little bit today about VMTs as sort of the marker by which we measure reduced greenhouse gas emissions. We think that's an important step forward in understanding the value of protecting ag land in terms of climate change mitigation, but suggest that moving forward that there are more sophisticated models now that we can use that really capture the full suite of GHG emission reduction benefits of that ag land protection, and encourage the council to work with ARB. The urban footprint was mentioned earlier, and this council helped invest in that model. That's one of several that can really look at more more sophisticated take on the greenhouse gas emission reductions associated with ag land protection beyond the VMTs. The numbers today sort of strike us as low, and we think future projects can look at capturing all of those GHG emission reduction benefits. Also, I wanted to speak to, just briefly, Mr. Fisher's comment about rangeland. In one of the studies that we talk a lot about that came out of Yolo County comparing an acre of urban land, the emissions associated with that, to an acre of ag land, when comparing that acre of urban land to rangeland, they found that that urban acre emitted 100 times more greenhouse gas emissions compared to that acre of rangeland. It was 70% difference when looking at irrigated cropland. So there are significant benefits to the investments that are being proposed today. And then just finally, in terms of funding, everyone's sort of favorite money questions, we think the initial investment was significant. That's why we're here today. But $5 million is really quite a modest start when considering the 29 million acres of agricultural land and the amount of loss that we experience annually. We hope that in the future, when the council takes up the question of what is an appropriate funding level for the program, that you consider at least 10% of the total program funds, which would, if moves forward, could be about $40 million, we think is an appropriate level for the next year of funding for the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicole Bird, followed by Nancy Schaefer.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Council. I'm Nicole Bird, the Executive Director of Solano Land Trust, and I will say ditto many of the folks that came before me. I won't repeat that, but I wanted to also add that I'm glad to hear that you guys are talking about looking into more of these GHG reductions from agriculture. I think that's a big one. Solano County is blessed with some amazing Class 1 soils and a lot of development pressure between, Sacramento and San Francisco, and I think we're just going to find that ag protection in those kinds of areas is going to yield lots of benefits. Thank you very much for your support and investment.
Thank you. Nancy Schaefer, followed by Juan Pablo Galvan.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Schaefer with the California Rangeland Trust, and I agree with many of the comments that have already been made, especially the good job that staff has done pulling this program together in such a short amount of time. California Rangeland Trust holds easements on 285,000 acres around the state. We have a waiting list of almost 400,000 acres of ranchers who would like to sell easements on their property and keep them in agriculture and keep them undeveloped. Many of these ranches would fit well with this program and would be able to get matching funds to complete those acquisitions. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan Pablo Galvan, followed by Kathy Leiden.
Hello, my name is Juan Pablo Galvan, and I'm the land use planner for Save Mount Diablo. I'd just like to very quickly say that we agree with many of the comments previously said. It'd be great in the future if a bit more funding was shunted toward this program, and we look forward to learning more and working with you guys and our partners in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Leiden, followed by...
Dan? Yeah, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm just going to... Krista Cassidy is next.
Yes, I'm Catherine Ledan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Brentwood Agricultural Land Trust. And I'd first like to start by thanking staff for working closely with practitioners of agricultural land conservation as you develop the program. And I work in the rapidly developing urban edge of the East Bay area. And as I might have told you in January, the city of Brentwood grew from 7,500 people in 1990 to over 56,000 people today. And all that development occurred on prime farmland, the best farmland that we have in the world. And it's dense suburban development. There's very few jobs in East Contra Costa County, so everybody in East Contra Costa County drives great distances to their work. So I think that a place on the urban edge like East Contra Costa County is a place where we could conserve land to prevent further sprawl and really reduce significant vehicle miles traveled. So today, what I really want to emphasize is one thing, and that's that protecting that land right on the urban edge where we could have the greatest greenhouse gas reductions is not an inexpensive venture. And it costs the Brentwood Agricultural Land Trust about $10,000 an acre to purchase an easement on prime farmland. So last year, this program allocated $4 million for farmland conservation easements. And even if we had concentrated all of that money right there on the urban edge where we're losing farmland to dense development, we could have only preserved 400 acres. So, you know, what I want to leave you with is to urge you when you consider funding for next year that you consider allocating a significantly higher amount. I support CalCAN's recommendation of $40 million because we do have the science to show that protecting land in places like Brentwood will prevent sprawl and reduce vehicle miles traveled. And we understand that in this program, we really need to demonstrate those greenhouse gas reductions, but we need enough money to be able to effectively do that. And so I urge you, when you consider funding, to consider $40 million for this program next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Krista Cassidy, followed by Taryn Cadena.
Morning. I'm Krista Cassidy. I'm with the Nature Conservancy. And as a member of the Sustainable Communities for All Climate Plan and the Natural and Working Lands Coalition, the Conservancy is pleased to support the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program Awards. And we're very excited to see these first investments made. We'd like to raise 3 issues that we continue to be interested in and concerned about, the first of which is integration. We believe in order to achieve GHG benefits in the most effective and coordinated way that delivers multiple benefits to communities, it is critically important that the SALC be integrated with the strategies for the built environment. Long-term and even beyond the SALC, we need to work on fully integrating natural and working lands investments and strategies in the built environment to fully achieve the benefits. This is fully consistent with the Governor's most recent executive order, AB 32 and AB 1532. And we look forward to working with the Council to achieve this vision, which was the original and is the current intent of state policy. The second point we'd like to make is around GHG emissions. We understand and agree that the current method of measuring GHG emissions for these projects can be improved and should be modified to account for all of the climate benefits, including carbon sequestration. We recognize that this is a complicated issue and the existing model used to quantify benefits has limitations. There are existing tools and tools currently in development that can be used to provide a more complete accounting of the climate benefits provided by the land base. We urge you to continue working on this issue so you can optimize GHG reductions in an integrated way to fully account for all of the climate benefits that are currently unaccounted for today. And the last point is just around funding, which will be echoing comments before us that there's clearly a demand for this program, and there are good projects out there to demonstrate this, and we urge you to significantly increase funding for the program. And last, I just wanted to thank you all for your work, congratulate you and the staff on what you've accomplished here, and thank you for your leadership, including Secretary Laird and Secretary Ross.
Thank you very much. Taryn Cadena, followed by Phoebe Seaton.
Hi, I'm Taryn Cadena, and I'm the Conservation Associate for YOLO Land Trust. I'm here to also ask your support to allocate at least $40 million for the Sustainable Agricultural Conservation Program in the future. Our mission is to conserve Yolo County farmland and ranch land so that agricultural productivity will continue, wildlife habitat will be sustained, open space will be preserved, and our rural quality of life will be safeguarded. We wish to maintain a sense of modern prosperity that is rooted in the values of longstanding tradition in the stewardship of the land. YOLO Land Trust provides landowners with a viable financial alternative to selling their land for development. And YOLO Land Trust has currently completed 23 agricultural conservation easements over the last 18 years with the Department of Conservation using funds from the California Farmland Conservancy Program. Overall, our organization has permanently protected over 11,000 acres of farmland by way of over 60 conservation easements, as well as the fee ownership of an easement-restricted farm. In addition, YOLO Land Trust supports habitat protection for plants and animals that depend upon farmland and their adjacent sloughs, creeks, and rivers for survival. We would like to continue this important work, but cannot do so without grant funds from the Department of Conservation. Yolo County continues to have a very strong policy to preserve agricultural lands, and this works in congruence with the work of the Yolo Land Trust to conserve farm and ranch land in Yolo County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Phoebe Seaton, followed by Kay Ogden.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much. I have a couple of questions that are overarching over the whole program, and then some specific to this program. We are, again, thrilled to have been a part of kind of development of the guidelines and work with staff and all of you. We are disappointed that there has been a lack of kind of transparency and access to information regarding the application process and applications with this program and the HSC program, and would like to see kind of full disclosure of applications and data and scoring materials so that we can better understand why certain projects were successful and certain were not. We also will repeat again next time that, well, we're very pleased with the projects that were selected. Many of the we're disappointed with the lack of geographic parity in this program. We know that that is in part a local issue and in part a guidelines issue. We look forward to working with you and locals to be more competitive in the SALC program, especially talking about the Central Coast and the San Joaquin Valley and the Eastern Coachella Valley. I want to kind of echo TNC's comments on integration of the built environment and this program. I think that, again, we're very supportive of protecting farmland, but disappointed that this isn't joined with a commitment to protecting farm worker housing. Would like to see kind of this joined again, more collaboration with the AHSC program to look at both working lands protection and farm worker housing to support those working lands. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Kay Ogden, followed by Tasha Newman.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Kay Ogden, Executive Director of the Eastern Sierra Land Trust. We have two projects before you today, the Land Strategy Grant for the Mono County and the project that was mentioned earlier that ranked rather high on the GHG emission reduction. I want to thank you so much for your consideration of rural projects. So often rural landscapes aren't given the same consideration in ranking priority. And I just want to thank you for acknowledging that rural lands are critically important, not only for GHG, but for our rural traditions and for the economics in our region. If anybody wants to come to the east side, love to have you out there. We often call the east side the forgotten side. So thank you so much for your investment.
Thank you. Tasha Newman, followed by, oh boy, Petrea Marchand.
Good morning, members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning. I am here on behalf of Andrea McKenzie, who is the General Manager of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, and they have been recommended for a planning grant this round, and she wanted me to say a couple things. We are tremendously excited to see the first round of cap and trade investments in our agricultural lands via the planning grants. The Open Space Authority is proud to be partnering with the County of Santa Clara on this first strategy grant. We feel strongly that planning is a vital part of a balanced program to strategically protect the state's most important agricultural lands. Santa Clara County and the Open Space Authority are fully prepared to implement the planning objectives that result as the outcome of their planning efforts through the grant that they are going to receive today. In addition, the Open Space Authority also recommends a continued investment in this program, as well as hopefully an increased investment in this program in the future. And they would also like to echo some of the statements made on the quantification of the GHG emission reduction benefits, and say there's a number of other ways in which to value the benefits of these projects, and we hope to see that in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Petrea Marchand, you can tell me how badly I did on that.
Excellent. It's Petrea Marchand. I'm the Executive Director of the Yolo Habitat Conservancy.
Good morning, Chair Alex, members of the board. The YOLO Habitat Conservancy is developing a county-wide habitat conservation plan and natural community conservation plan. It is one of the first natural community conservation plans in the state that is focused almost exclusively on wildlife-friendly agriculture in the form of permanent conservation easements on cultivated land. So this program, we're still in the planning phase, but we will be in implementation in 2017. So I want to echo the comments of previous people of the need for this program, the need for additional funding for this program, and also the need to expand the benefit estimates to include things like carbon sequestration. I think that's going to be very important for helping plans like mine that are focusing on wildlife-friendly agriculture. We also have a number of important habitat properties that are near urban development, and so that will continue to be an important focus of our efforts, but the other benefits are important as well. I also wanted to just make a request for clarification. I know you guys are going to be amending or revising the guidelines. It would be helpful for us to know whether you are going to encourage or discourage easements that focus primarily on maintaining row crops and prevent the conversion to orchards and vineyards. That is an important component of our wildlife-friendly agricultural easements. Our easement template, the one we will use for the next 50 years, does prevent the conversion from orchards to orchards and vineyards. Both types of easements are important. Obviously, our YOLO Land Trust does those types of easements, and we work in close partnership with the YOLO Land Trust. But it'll be really important for the guidelines to clarify whether you're encouraging or discouraging those types of easements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for all of the comments. We have an open motion before the council, and I suspect we have some comments. Secretary Laird.
I was going to be really brief because amazingly that was supposed to be the briefest of our two hearings. And so what I wanted to say is just that I think the comments were good, helpful, and supportive. We had a great discussion beforehand. Greenhouse gas reductions is our first priority, and this matches that. In the pre-proposals, there was 3 times as much asked for as was available in the process. There was even in the actual proposals a significant amount more. The package leverages 200% more in contributions than comes from the grants, and I think that the case was made for us to really consider a share that meets some of this demand when we move on later to the allocation of an increased amount of money that we hope will come out of the next budget process. So I asked everybody to join me in an aye vote on the motion.
Any other comments from council members? Secretary Ross?
Just once again, I find myself supporting everything that Secretary Laird has said. I really appreciate all the comments. I thought it was very constructive, and I'm very excited to get going for next year. So I appreciate everyone else's support for this plan.
So a couple of very quick comments from me. Year one of the program, $5 million, obviously pretty modest start, but it required creating a full program. So again, I want to thank the staff, and from the comments, there are some things we need to look at in some more detail, and we are absolutely committed to doing that. But I think really for year one and having done it in a really truncated time period, a lot of support. I also want to note there are a lot of entities and people out in the world doing this work, and it's greatly appreciated. We certainly will hopefully have the chance to consider further allocation for funds for this when we get to the point of knowing what the cap and trade allocation for next year will be. Any other comments? All right, so on the motion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have unanimous adoption of the SALT grants as proposed by staff. Yay. All right, moving right along.